Ever wondered what people actually ate in the Middle Ages? No, it wasn't just giant turkey legs and goblets of wine like in the movies. In reality, medieval meals were simple, hearty, and believe it or not, affordable. And here's the best part. A lot of them are still totally doable today without breaking the bank. From thick rustic pottage to crispy cheese tarts and even a medieval-style pizza, these meals were designed to be filling, nutritious, and easy to make with basic ingredients. Whether you're a history buff, a budget-conscious foodie, or just curious about what life tasted like centuries ago, we've got you covered. So grab your wooden spoon and get ready to step back in time. Here are 30 cheap medieval meals you can still make today, and trust me, some of them might just become your new favorite comfort foods. Let's dive in. Pottage. First on our list, we have the pottage. All right, picture this. You're living in the Middle Ages, and there's no DoorDash, no ramen packets, and definitely no drive-thrus. What do you eat? Pottage. This was the go-to meal for peasants, monks, and even some nobles when times got tough. And here's the best part. You can still make it today for almost nothing. So, what is pottage? It's basically a super thick, slow-cooked stew made with whatever you've got lying around. The base, grains like barley or oats. Then, toss in whatever veggies you have. Onions, carrots, leeks, cabbage, or even wild herbs if you're feeling fancy. If you had meat, great. If not, no big deal. It's delicious either way. To make this medieval go-to meal, just boil water or broth. Throw in your grains, add your veggies, and let it all simmer until it's thick and hearty. Add a pinch of salt, maybe some garlic, and boom, instant medieval comfort food. And the best thing about pottage is that it's dirt cheap, super filling, and crazy easy to make. If you're on a budget or just want to eat like a medieval peasant for fun, give pottage a shot. Trust me, it's like history in a bowl. Barley porridge. Have you ever wondered what medieval peasants ate to stay full and survive the harsh winters? Well, let me introduce you to barley porridge, a cheap, hearty, and surprisingly tasty dish that's been fueling people for centuries. And the best part about this is that you can still make it today right in your own kitchen, with just a few simple ingredients. Back in the Middle Ages, barley was the go-to grain for common folk. Unlike wheat, which was expensive and reserved for the rich, barley was cheap, easy to grow, and packed with nutrients. People would simmer it in water or broth, sometimes adding a bit of salt, honey, or milk if they were lucky. This porridge was warm, filling, and could keep you going all day. Today, barley porridge is still a budget-friendly meal. To make this medieval delicacy, all you need is barley, water, and a pinch of salt. Simmer it for about 30 to 40 minutes until it thickens, and boom, you've got yourself an authentic medieval meal. But if you want to spice it up, you can add some honey, butter, or even a fried egg. So next time you're broke but hungry, try a bowl of barley porridge. It's medieval, it's cheap, and it might just be your new favorite comfort food. Oat gruel. All right, let's talk about oat gruel. This is one of the cheapest, simplest, and most surprisingly filling medieval meals that you can still whip up today for almost nothing. Back in the Middle Ages, this was the go-to breakfast and sometimes dinner for peasants, monks, and even soldiers on the road. Why? Because it's dirt cheap, ridiculously easy to make, and packed with slow-burning energy. So, what is oat gruel? Think of it like a thinner, more rustic version of oatmeal. Instead of thick, hearty porridge, gruel is runny, almost like a soup. It was often made by boiling oats in water or milk, sometimes with a pinch of salt, honey, or whatever scraps of food were lying around. No fancy toppings, no sugar overload, just pure medieval survival fuel. The best part? You can still make it today for pennies. Just start by taking half a cup of oats, 2 cups of water, and a pinch of salt. Then simmer it until it's nice and warm. If you would like to add a modern twist to it, add a drizzle of honey or a splash of milk. So next time you're low on cash, channel your inner medieval peasant and try oat gruel. You might just love it. Bread and dripping. Bread and dripping was a common and inexpensive meal in medieval times, particularly among the lower classes, and it consisted of stale or fresh bread dipped into the fat drippings left over from roasting meat, often beef or pork. This simple dish provided essential calories and fats, making it a staple for those who had little else to eat. In medieval kitchens, no part of an animal was wasted, and the rendered fat from cooking meat was often collected and reused. The bread, which was usually made from rye or barley for the poor, absorbed the flavorful fat, sometimes seasoned with a pinch of salt or herbs. Today, bread and dripping remains a budget-friendly snack. Want to try this medieval dish out? Simply collect the fat after roasting meat, allow it to cool slightly, and spread it over thick slices of bread. For extra flavor, sprinkle some salt, pepper, or even onions over it. This dish, while simple, offers a taste of history and a reminder of how people made the most of their resources in the past. Try this out. You might just have found your new comfort food, bread and cheese. Ever wondered what a medieval peasant's lunch looked like? Spoiler alert, it wasn't a turkey leg. One of the simplest, cheapest, and most widely eaten meals back then was bread and cheese. And guess what? You can still make it today, even if you are on a budget. But first, let's give a quick backstory. Back in medieval times, bread was the backbone of nearly every meal. Peasants, nobles, monks, you name it, they all ate bread. The type depended on status. The rich had fine white loaves, while the poor relied on coarse, dense rye or barley bread. Cheese was a staple too, since it was easy to make, lasted a long time, and provided much-needed protein. Fast forward to modern times, and you can recreate this medieval classic with just 2 ingredients. Grab a loaf of rustic bread, think sourdough, rye, or even a dense homemade loaf. Pair it with a cheap aged cheese like cheddar, Gouda, or even homemade farmer's cheese, and voila, you've got a filling, affordable meal that's straight out of the Middle Ages. So next time you're low on cash or just want to eat like a medieval peasant without the plague, try some good old bread and cheese. Simple, timeless, and ridiculously cheap. Peas porridge. All right, let's talk about peas porridge, the medieval meal that's been feeding hungry people for centuries. It's cheap, it's filling, and yes, you can still make it today without breaking the bank. So, what is it? Peas porridge is basically a thick, hearty pea soup made from dried peas, water, and a few simple seasonings. In medieval times, this was a go-to meal for peasants and even some wealthier folks because dried peas were easy to store and packed with protein. If you've ever heard the old rhyme, peas porridge hot, peas porridge cold, peas porridge in the pot, 9 days old. Yeah, that's about this dish. Now, making it is ridiculously simple. All you need are split peas, water or broth, an onion, maybe some salt, and if you're feeling fancy, a little bacon or ham for extra flavor. Boil it down until it's thick and creamy, and boom, you've got a medieval feast for just a couple of bucks. Want to know the best part about this dish? It tastes even better the next day as it thickens up. Hence why medieval folks kept it simmering for days. So if you're looking for a cheap, historical, and actually tasty meal, give peas porridge a shot. Rye pancakes. If you were a medieval peasant or just someone on a tight budget today, rye pancakes would be your best friend. Back in the day, wheat was expensive and often reserved for the nobility. Rye, on the other hand, was the underdog of medieval grains, sturdy, reliable, and cheap enough that even the humblest of servants could afford it. Making rye pancakes is as simple as it gets. Mix rye flour with water or milk if you're feeling fancy. Add a pinch of salt, and maybe crack an egg if your chickens have been generous. Fry them in whatever fat you can get your hands on, and voila, you've got a meal that's been feeding folks for centuries. These pancakes are a little denser than modern flapjacks, but they've got a rustic charm and a pleasantly nutty taste. Smear on some honey, cheese, or just enjoy them plain with a side of existential contemplation. So, if you want a taste of history on a budget, whip up some rye pancakes. Your wallet and your inner peasant will thank you. Maslin bread. If you've ever wanted to bake like a medieval peasant, but with slightly better hygiene, Maslin bread is a great place to start. A rustic mix of wheat and rye. This loaf was the go-to for those who couldn't afford pure wheat bread, but still wanted to avoid eating straight-up tree bark. Maslin was the medieval equivalent of budget-friendly whole grain, nutritious, filling, and just chewy enough to double as a weapon in a food fight. Making Maslin bread today is delightfully simple. Mix rye flour, wheat flour, water, salt, and a little yeast. Or go full medieval and use sourdough starter. Knead it, let it rise, bake it, and voila! You've got a loaf that would make a 14th century baker weep with pride. Perfect with cheese, butter, or just an existential sigh. Maslin bread is a delicious reminder that eating well doesn't have to cost a fortune. Plus, if you forget about it for a week, congratulations. You've accidentally made a medieval-style doorstop. Leek and barley soup. If you've ever wanted to eat like a medieval peasant, minus the plague and questionable hygiene, leek and barley soup is your go-to, budget-friendly dish. This simple yet hearty meal was a staple for those who couldn't afford lavish feasts of roasted boar and endless goblets of wine. But don't let its humble origins fool you. This soup is as comforting as a warm woolen cloak on a chilly night. Leeks, the underrated cousin of onions, give this dish a subtle sweetness, while barley adds a satisfying chewiness that makes you feel like you're getting your money's worth. Because, let's be honest, you are. Back in medieval times, people didn't waste food, and neither should we. Got some sad-looking leeks in the fridge? Toss 'em in. A handful of barley? Perfect. A bone you found in last night's roast? Even better. Simmer it all together. Add a pinch of salt, if you're feeling fancy. And voila. A meal fit for a medieval peasant. A frugal gourmet. Who says history isn't delicious? Trenchers. Back in the Middle Ages, folks weren't too keen on washing dishes, mostly because they didn't have many. Enter the trencher, a thick slice of stale bread that doubled as a plate. You'd pile your stew, pottage, or roasted meat on top. Let the bread soak up all the delicious juices, and then, if you weren't a noble passing it off to your servant, you'd eat the whole thing, efficient and tasty. The best part? You can still make trenchers today for next to nothing. Got a loaf of old bread? Perfect. Just slice it thick and let it get a little tougher. Then ladle your favorite stew, soup, or even scrambled eggs onto it, and boom, medieval fine dining. No need to scrub a plate. It's the ultimate budget meal. Bread that works as food and tableware. Plus, if you're feeling extra authentic, you can serve it with a goblet of ale and pretend you're feasting in a candlelit hall or your dimly lit kitchen. Just beware, modern guests might still ask for a plate. Lentil pottage. If you were born in the medieval times and also on a very tight budget, lentil pottage would be your go-to meal. This thick, hearty stew was a staple for centuries because lentils were cheap, filling, and best of all, didn't require you to own a farm full of livestock. Back then, pottage was basically the medieval version of throw whatever you have in a pot and hope for the best. Making it today is just as easy. Boil some lentils in water or broth, toss in whatever veggies you've got lying around, onions, carrots, maybe some garlic if you're feeling fancy, and season it with salt, pepper, and a dash of medieval authenticity, aka thyme. Let it simmer, and congratulations, you've just cooked like a 14th century commoner. It's nutritious, ridiculously cheap, and perfect for those days when your bank account looks like it's been hit by a Viking raid. So next time you're broke but hungry, channel your inner medieval peasant and whip up a pot of lentil pottage. Your ancestors would be proud. Cabbage and onion stew. If you ever find yourself broke but craving something warm and hearty, take a page from the medieval peasant's cookbook and whip up some cabbage and onion stew. Back in the day, this dish was a staple among common folk, mostly because cabbage and onions were easy to grow, hard to kill, and about as cheap as medieval dirt. The recipe is as simple as can possibly be. Simply chop up a cabbage, slice some onions, toss them in a pot with water or weak broth, and let it simmer until everything is tender. If you're feeling fancy, add a pinch of salt or herbs, assuming you haven't already traded them for firewood. The beauty of this meal? It's dirt cheap, surprisingly tasty, and makes you feel like a resourceful peasant who could survive in a medieval village or just a modern grocery store on a tight budget. Bonus, it keeps vampires away, or at least anyone who dislikes the smell of onions. Turnip soup. Back in the Middle Ages, turnips were the underappreciated heroes of peasant cuisine. If you couldn't afford meat, fancy bread, or anything remotely exciting, you could always count on the humble turnip. And guess what? You still can. Making turnip soup today is just as cheap and easy as it was centuries ago. All you need are turnips, obviously, some onions, a bit of garlic, and whatever broth-like liquid you can scrounge up. Medieval folks would throw in whatever herbs they had on hand. So feel free to get creative, or just raid your spice rack. Want to make this? Chop, boil, mash a little, and season to taste. If you're feeling rich, add butter. If you're feeling really rich, a splash of cream. If you want to go full medieval peasant, just eat it straight and pretend you don't know what salt is. It may not win any Michelin stars, but turnip soup is warm, filling, and best of all, dirt cheap. So, embrace your inner medieval peasant and enjoy a meal that has stood the test of time and poverty. Mushroom and herb stew. If you've ever wanted to eat like a medieval peasant without actually becoming one, mushroom and herb stew is a perfect dish to try. Back in the Middle Ages, mushrooms were basically free, provided you didn't pick the poisonous ones. Lucky for us, modern supermarkets have taken the guesswork out of, will this kill me, foraging. This dish is as simple as it gets. Just grab some mushrooms, button, cremini, or whatever's cheapest: onions, garlic, and a handful of fresh or dried herbs. Think thyme, sage, or parsley. Simmer everything in a bit of vegetable or meat broth, and voila, a hearty, flavorful stew that'll transport you straight to a medieval tavern, minus the questionable hygiene and risk of plague. Best of all, it's ridiculously cheap. No need for fancy truffle oil or imported mushrooms. This is peasant food at its finest. Pair it with some crusty bread, and you've got a meal fit for a king. Just don't forget to thank your lucky stars you're eating this by choice, not because the feudal system demands it. Garlic and onion pottage. If you're looking for a meal that's both medieval and budget-friendly, garlic and onion pottage is the way to go. This dish was a staple for peasants in the Middle Ages, mainly because onions and garlic were cheap, easy to grow, and had the added benefit of keeping both disease and nosy neighbors at bay. Making it today is laughably simple. Just grab some onions, garlic, water, and a bit of stale bread to thicken it up. If you're feeling fancy, throw in some herbs or a splash of broth, because we're living the dream in the 21st century. Simmer everything together until it turns into a thick, fragrant stew that will warm your soul and possibly your sinuses. This dish is nutritious, requires minimal effort, and costs next to nothing. Plus, with that much garlic, you'll ward off colds, vampires, and any unwanted romantic attention for the next 24 hours. Medieval peasants knew what they were doing, so why not take a page from their very old cookbook? Roasted parsnips. Back in medieval times, if you weren't a lord feasting on roast swan and spiced wine, you were probably eating parsnips. These humble root vegetables were the medieval answer to potatoes, except they were actually around. Roasted parsnips were cheap, filling, and easy to cook, making them a staple for peasants and frugal knights alike. The best part? They're still just as cheap today. Grab a few parsnips, probably for less than $1, slice them up, drizzle with oil or butter, and roast them until golden brown. Medieval cooks likely used lard or animal drippings, but unless you've got a roast boar on a spit, olive oil works just fine. Sprinkle with salt, and if you're feeling fancy, a pinch of medieval-approved herbs like thyme or rosemary. The result? A side dish that's crispy on the outside, sweet on the inside, and tastes way better than anything your medieval ancestors had to suffer through. Who knew eating like a peasant could be so delicious? Spinach and egg bake. If you think budget-friendly meals are a modern struggle, think again. Medieval peasants had it down to an art. One such masterpiece is the spinach and egg bake, a simple dish that's nutritious, cheap, and guaranteed to make you feel like a peasant with class. Back in the day, eggs were a peasant's protein source, because stealing a noble's cow was frowned upon, and spinach was a green that practically grew itself. Toss them together with a bit of flour or cheese if you were feeling fancy, and boom, dinner fit for a hard-working person. Making this today is just as easy. All you need is spinach, eggs, and a sprinkle of salt, though feel free to modernize it with cheese or spices. Simply sauté the spinach, mix it with whisked eggs, pour into a dish, and bake. No expensive ingredients, no stress. So, if your grocery budget is looking medieval, take a note from history and whip up a spinach and egg bake, and pretend you're feasting in a castle rather than budgeting like a broke knight. Carrot and pea mash. If medieval peasants had a favorite comfort food, it was probably carrot and pea mash. Simple, hearty, and laughably cheap. This dish has survived centuries because, let's face it, peas and carrots aren't going anywhere. Back in the Middle Ages, people didn't have access to fancy seasonings. No chili flakes or soy sauce, sorry. Instead, they boiled carrots and peas into submission, mashed them together, and added a pinch of salt or lard if they were feeling luxurious. The result? A bright, slightly sweet, and surprisingly satisfying dish that kept bellies full. And the best part of all this? You can still whip up this medieval mash today for next to nothing. Just boil some carrots and peas, mash them together like a medieval chef with a wooden spoon, and season to taste. Want to feel extra authentic? Serve it with stale bread and pretend you're dining in a candlelit castle or a poorly insulated hut. Cheap, healthy, and peasant approved. Carrot and pea mash is proof that even medieval folks knew how to stretch a grocery budget. Nettle soup. Back in medieval times, if you were broke, which, let's face it, most people were, you didn't pop down to the local market, you foraged. And nothing screamed free food like nettles, the plant that fights back. But if you could brave the sting, you were rewarded with a nutritious, hearty meal that cost absolutely nothing. Nettle soup was a medieval staple, made by boiling these feisty greens with onions, a bit of salt, and maybe some scraps of meat if you were feeling fancy. The secret? Cooking neutralizes the sting, so you won't feel like you're eating a swarm of angry bees. Today, nettle soup is still a fantastic budget-friendly dish, packed with vitamins and iron, perfect for those who want to eat like a medieval peasant, minus the plague. So, grab some gloves, find a patch of nettles, preferably not next to a dog park, and whip up a pot of history. It's delicious, nutritious, and, best of all, still completely free, just like it was 600 years ago. Stuffed onions. If you think fancy stuffed vegetables are a modern invention, think again. Medieval peasants, and maybe a few thrifty nobles, were stuffing onions long before avocados became trendy. Stuffed onions were a cheap, filling meal that made use of simple ingredients, and best of all, they're still ridiculously easy to make today. Picture this. You're in a medieval village, your purse is lighter than a feather, and all you've got are onions, a handful of grains, and maybe some scraps of meat. What do? You hollow out those onions, pack them with whatever you can scrounge, barley, herbs, maybe a bit of cheese, and roast them until they're soft, golden, and smelling like something far fancier than they actually are. And the best part? You can still make stuffed onions today for pennies. Swap medieval grains for rice, add some bacon, because bacon improves everything, and you've got yourself a delicious, budget-friendly meal that even a medieval peasant would envy. Just don't forget to brush your teeth afterward, unless you want medieval breath to go with it. Egg and cheese omelet. If you think medieval peasants were eating sad, flavorless gruel every day, think again. Meet egg and cheese omelet. This was a simple, yet glorious dish, enjoyed by those lucky enough to have a few chickens scratching around the yard. It's basically medieval fast food, quick, cheap, and satisfying. Back in the day, eggs were a peasant's best friend. Chickens didn't require much upkeep, and they paid their rent in eggs. Cheese? Well, if you had a cow or a friendly neighbor with a cow, you were in business. Mix the two together, toss in some herbs if you're feeling fancy, and boom, instant breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Unlike modern omelets packed with 17 different ingredients, the medieval version was straightforward. Eggs, cheese, maybe a pinch of salt, and a good hot pan. No need for non-stick cookware, just a bit of lard or butter did the trick. So, if your grocery budget is looking medieval, this dish is proof that even the simplest foods can be delicious. Plus, it's ready in 5 minutes, much faster than a knight could saddle a horse. Baked apples with lard. If you've ever craved a dessert that says, "I'm sweet, savory, and slightly questionable," then baked apples with lard might be your new favorite medieval dish. This was a go-to treat for peasants and nobles alike because apples were everywhere, and lard was basically medieval butter, but with a stronger barnyard essence. Making this today is laughably cheap. Grab an apple, any kind, but the uglier, the better for historical accuracy, core it, and stuff it with a spoonful of lard. Bake it until it looks like something that's survived a dragon attack, and boom, you've got an authentic medieval snack. If you're feeling fancy, add a drizzle of honey or a sprinkle of cinnamon. The result? A surprisingly tasty mix of crispy caramelized apple with a savory, melt-in-your-mouth richness. It's weirdly good, like history's answer to sweet and salty popcorn. So, if you're broke but adventurous, why not channel your inner medieval peasant and give it a try? Just don't tell your modern doctor. Haggis. Medieval haggis. Ah, haggis, the humble, hearty dish that proves medieval folks truly believed in waste not, want not. This ancient dish is essentially a budget-friendly medieval meatloaf, but instead of wasting good cuts, they stuffed all the odd bits, liver, lungs, heart, into a sheep's stomach, boiled it, and called it dinner. Sounds a bit gruesome? Maybe. Delicious? Absolutely. Haggis was the perfect peasant meal. It was cheap, filling, and packed with protein. Since medieval people didn't have the luxury of discarding perfectly edible organs, they got creative. By mixing minced offal with oats, onions, and a dash of medieval spice, mostly salt and a prayer, they crafted a meal that stuck to their ribs, sometimes literally. The best part of all this? You can still make haggis today, and you don't even need a spare sheep's stomach lying around. Modern versions swap it for sausage casings or baking dishes, making it far less terrifying to prepare. So, if you're feeling adventurous, or just want to honor your inner medieval chef, give haggis a try. Your ancestors would be proud. Blood pudding. If you think modern budget meals are bad, medieval peasants would like a word. Enter blood pudding, the ultimate nose-to-tail dish that made sure no part of the animal went to waste, including its very lifeblood. cheap, filling, and oddly delicious, if you don't think too hard about it. Blood pudding was a medieval staple. And guess what? You can still make it today, assuming your butcher doesn't look at you like you've joined a vampire cult. At its core, blood pudding is a simple mix of animal blood, typically pig, oats or barley, fat, and spices, all stuffed into a casing and boiled or fried. It's rich in iron, protein, and a sense of historical adventure. Want to impress or horrify your dinner guests? Serve them homemade blood pudding and watch their reactions. So, if you're broke and brave, why not give this ancient dish a try? After all, it's proof that medieval folks knew how to stretch a meal and their imagination. Just don't forget the onions and a stiff drink to wash it down. Fried herring. If medieval peasants had a favorite fish, it was probably herring. Cheap, abundant, and easy to preserve, herring was the go-to meal for those who couldn't afford fancy meats, while nobles feasted on roast swans and peacocks, because nothing says status like eating something with feathers that's mostly decorative. The common folk were frying up herring in their humble kitchens. Making fried herring today is as simple as it was back then, minus the smoky open hearth kitchen. Just grab some fresh or salted herring, coat it lightly in flour, and fry it up in oil or butter. Add a sprinkle of salt, a squeeze of lemon, if you're feeling fancy, and serve it with bread or boiled barley. Sure, your house might smell like a medieval fish market for a bit, but that's the price of authenticity. Plus, herring is packed with omega-3s, so you're basically eating like a health-conscious time traveler. Cheap, nutritious, and a taste of history. Fried herring proves that good food never really goes out of style. Pork and apple stew. If you think medieval peasants were dining on nothing but gruel and despair, think again. Pork and apple stew was a budget-friendly dish that even the humblest servants could enjoy, assuming they hadn't angered the local lord and lost their pig privileges. This hearty dish combines the rich, fatty goodness of pork, often the cheaper cuts, because who can afford the king's roast, with the natural sweetness of apples, which were as common in medieval England as questionable hygiene. Toss in some onions, a splash of cheap ale or cider, because water was suspect back then, and a handful of herbs, and you've got yourself a meal fit for a noble, if the noble happened to be on a tight budget. The best part? You can still make this today for just a few coins. Pork shoulder, a couple of apples, and some stock will get you a stew that's both delicious and dirt cheap. So, grab a bowl, channel your inner medieval chef, and feast like it's $13.99 without the fear of plague. Chicken feet soup. If you think modern budget meals are creative, medieval peasants were the true masters of thrift. Meat chicken feet soup, a dish that proves no part of the bird went to waste. Not even the scrawniest, most totally underrated bit. Back in the day, chicken feet were a peasant's delight, packed with collagen and flavor, even if they looked like tiny medieval goblin hands. Toss them into a bubbling cauldron, or, a regular pot, with onions, garlic, herbs, and whatever root vegetables you have lying around. And you've got yourself a nourishing, gelatin-rich broth that would make any medieval granny proud. It's shockingly cheap, deliciously hearty, and, bonus, it might just give your skin that dewy, knight-in-shining complexion glow. Plus, there's something hilariously medieval about slurping soup while a bony claw dangles off your spoon. So, if you're feeling adventurous, or just really frugal, give chicken feet soup a try. After all, if it kept medieval folks going through plagues and famines, it can probably get you through a tight grocery budget. Rabbit stew. Back in medieval times, if you were too poor to afford beef but clever enough to chase down a rabbit, you were in luck. Rabbit stew was a cheap, hearty meal that kept many peasants, and a few sneaky poachers, well fed. Unlike cows or pigs, rabbits bred like, rabbits, making them a widely available source of protein. The recipe hasn't changed much over the centuries. Throw a rabbit into a pot with onions, garlic, carrots, and some herbs, whatever you can scavenge from the garden or borrow from your neighbor's yard. Add some water or ale. Let it simmer until the meat is fall off the bone tender, and voila, a stew fit for a medieval lord, or at least a very satisfied peasant. Nowadays, rabbit is still an affordable and sustainable meat option, though you might get some funny looks if you mention catching your own. Whether you buy it or source it creatively, rabbit stew remains a delicious, budget-friendly meal that proves medieval folks really knew how to eat well on the cheap. Boiled snails. Boiled snails. Because nothing says fine dining like foraging in your backyard for dinner. Back in the medieval era, peasants and even some thrifty nobles dined on snails because, well, they were free, plentiful, and didn't put up much of a fight. Unlike a runaway chicken, snails politely stayed put while you caught them. Preparing medieval-style boiled snails is surprisingly simple. First, purge them. Don't worry, this just means feeding them clean food for a few days so they don't taste like, well, dirt. Then, drop them into boiling water with a few herbs. Think thyme, garlic, and maybe a splash of vinegar if you're feeling fancy. A little salt, a little patience, and voila, you have a protein-packed, budget-friendly dish that medieval folks swore by. Sure, they may not replace your go-to comfort food, but for those craving a taste of history, or just a weird story to tell at dinner, boiled snails are a medieval meal you can still enjoy today. Just maybe don't tell your guests what they're eating until after they try it. Smoked fish and rye bread. If you think medieval peasants were feasting on roasted boar and guzzling mead all day, think again. One of their actual go-to meals, smoked fish and rye bread, was a dish so simple and cheap, it survived the test of time and inflation. Back in the Middle Ages, smoking fish was the medieval version of refrigeration. No fridge, no problem. Just hang that fish over a fire, let it soak up some smoky goodness, and voila, you've got preserved protein that lasts for weeks. Rye bread was equally practical. Wheat was for the rich, but rye, that was for the rest of us. Dense, hearty, and able to survive long winters without turning into a science experiment. Making this meal today is just as easy. Grab some smoked herring or mackerel, both budget-friendly, slap it on a slice of rye bread, and maybe add a squeeze of lemon if you're feeling fancy. It's delicious, nutritious, and medieval approved. Plus, you get to feel like a time traveler, minus the plague. So, there you have it. 30 cheap medieval meals you can still make today. These dishes prove that simple ingredients, creative cooking, and a little bit of patience can go a long way. Whether you're looking for a hearty peasant pottage, a rustic barley porridge, or even a budget-friendly medieval stew, these meals are proof that good food doesn't have to break the bank. Plus, they connect us to a time when people made the most of what they had, wasted nothing, and still ate well. So, why not try one of these dishes for dinner tonight? And if you enjoyed this list, hit that like button, subscribe for more historical food content, and let us know in the comments which one you'd try first.